COP26, 100 nations and parties signed to cut methane emissions by 30% of 2020 levels by 2030, just as AFDB pledges support for the recharging of water to Lake Chad Basin. National Bureau of Statistics to ascertain poverty status of Nigeria flags off multi-dimensional poverty index. Plus, oil prices fell on Wednesday as pressure mounted on OPEC to increase supply. Details of this and more on Business Express on the network service of the NTA, and we are reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Benny Adams, your guide. Good to have you join us on the business side of life, and we'll start by telling you that the National Bureau of Statistics is set to establish Nigeria's actual poverty index as it flags off the multi-dimensional poverty index survey in Nigeria for 2021. The Bureau, in collaboration with its development partners, the UNDP, UNICEF and NASCO, has also kicked off a training of trainers this Wednesday. The Global Multidimensional Poverty Index is an international measure of acute poverty covering over 100 countries. It captures severe deprivations in health, living standards, employment, safety, and many other aspects of poverty. The survey is to, among other things, correct the impression that Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world by getting the country's own data on income and non-income based dimensions of poverty and tell its own story with facts and figures.
Nigeria, and in particular users of statistics across the three tiers of government. At this point, I wish to solicit for the cooperation of all respondents at the household level and as well as the community level across the country to respond adequately to all inquiries as expected of them.
The uniqueness of the MPI is that it allows for poverty to be easily decomposed into various dimensions. Identify the poorest people and the combination of deprivation that most affect them. Increasingly becoming an especially useful tool for policymakers in Nigeria. So far in Nigeria, we have independently computed 3 rounds of MPI. The first one was conducted and published in 2011 together with UNDP. The second was in 2014, and the latest, the last one was in 2017-2018.
The survey, which will help informed evidence-based social policies for targeted interventions, is also expected to help monitor progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, NIPC, reports that the sum of $8.99 billion was tracked as investment announcement for Q3 of 2021, a 130% increase in the corresponding period in 2020, which was $3.95 billion. Acting Executive Secretary of the Commission, Emeka Ofo, disclosed that a total of 33 projects were tracked across 8 states during the period, with the month of August as the most active during the quarter, accounting for 64% of the total announcement in the period under review. Lagos State came tops with 20 projects accounting for 81% of the total. Rivers, Oyo State followed, and the top sectors were manufacturing, electricity, gas, steam, and air conditioning supply. Others are ICT and transportation. Domestic investors were the most active during the period, followed by announcements from South Korea, South Africa, the Kingdom of Spain. The NIPC launched also a one-stop investment center, which businesses can be registered, woo investors, as well as showcase specific investment opportunities.
The foundation for transparency, accountability, and proactive disclosure have been made. We are committed to building on the successes of recent years, as well as breaking new frontiers.
We are working tirelessly to ensure that there's an enabling environment for investors to come and invest in the country.
As the COVID-19 curve flattens in Nigeria, the task of rebuilding the economy has become necessary, which the fourth edition of the Nigeria Diaspora Investment Summit is focusing particularly. How Nigerians outside the country can be part of this revival drive. Bosse Abel reports that the initiative is by Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, NIDCOM.
Two-day summit and preparations are non-stop. The chairman Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabiri Erewa, is making it a total package to resuscitate the economy, ranging from ICT, agro-business, health, entertainment, sport, oil and gas, education to real estate, with the theme Diaspora Partnership and Linkages for Post-COVID Economic Growth.
This year's summit comes on the heels of the government's current emphasis on providing unprecedented support for the small business sector, agriculture, and massive infrastructural development. So diaspora investors will therefore be encouraged to channel their investments into these as well as other areas of the economy.
The summit, a federal government drive to attract foreign direct investment, also received the endorsement of the private sector in Nigeria, with participants expected mostly from the diaspora. In Abuja, Bosse Abel, NTA News.
The 2022 budget of the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation has more than doubled following a federal government memo. National Assembly correspondent Lami Ali tells us more.
The foreign service element is being introduced to our budget for the first time this year. It used to be with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but with some administrative changes, this has now been shifted to our office.
The agency is relying on its law, which says that his board shall approve his budget. And I have told the agency that the law, whether made in error or even rightly, is not superior to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We are using this opportunity to inform the agency. If they fail to present their budget, there will be no appropriation for that agency this year, 2022.
Nigeria needs an estimated $1.5 trillion over a 10-year period in order to achieve an appreciable level of the national infrastructure stock. President Muhammadu Buhari disclosed this figure at a high-level side event on improving global infrastructure hosted by the U.S. President Joe Biden, EU Commission President von der Leyen, and the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. State House correspondent Adamu Sambo has the details.
President Muhammadu Buhari told a high-level meeting that a clear legal and regulatory framework for private financing of infrastructure has already been developed by his administration. The country, he said, is now ready for investments in infrastructural development by willing international partners. President Buhari believes that new investments in critical sectors of the economy would aid in lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty by the year 2030, saying there is a clear nexus between the provision of infrastructure and the overall economic development of a nation. The president welcomed the G7 countries for their groundbreaking plan to mobilize hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure investments for low and middle-income countries under the Build Back Better World initiative. He used the occasion to outline the principles, values, and standards Nigeria would like to see from the initiative and the challenges the country has faced in partnering with donors on infrastructure development. The aim of pursuing quality infrastructure investment, the President explained, is to create a virtuous cycle of economic activities while ensuring sound public finances. President Buhari made a case for the alignment of infrastructure projects with national strategies and nationally determined contributions. From Glasgow, Scotland, Adamu Sambu.
Still on the president has announced Nigeria's commitment to net zero by the year 2060. Achieving this, he, however, said, depends largely on the ability of the country to integrate an unprecedented 7 gigawatts additional renewable energy capacity each year. This was while addressing the 26th session of the United Nations Conference on Climate Change in Glasgow, Scotland. State House correspondent Adam Sambo again reports.
I do not think anyone in Nigeria needs persuading of the need for urgent action on the environment.
Desertification in the north, floods in the center, pollution and erosion on the coast, and Lake Chad, now a shadow of itself from a vast expanse of biodiversity, as President Buhari says, are enough evidence that climate change in Nigeria is not about what might happen tomorrow. It is already happening today and with devastating consequences.
Nigeria is not looking to make the same mistakes that have been repeated for decades by others. We are looking for partners in innovation, technology and finance to make cleaner and more efficient use of all available resources to help make for a more stable transition in energy markets. Nigeria is committed to net zero by 2060.
Zero net, the President agrees, can lead to economic transformation across all sectors, and therefore a detailed energy transition plan and roadmap based on data and evidence has been developed by the federal government.
And the data and evidence shows that Nigeria can continue to use gas until 2040 without detracting from the goals of the Paris Agreement. Nigeria is actually more of a gas than an oil-producing country. Consequently, I am requesting for financing of projects using transition fuels such as gas.
Nigeria insists that attaining national and global climate change goals will require adequate and sustained technical and financial support to developing countries. Emerging economies, President Buhari says, need access to stable and abundant supply of inexpensive energy if the desired growth and prosperity that underpin political stability and democracy are to be delivered.
Nigeria's commitment to a just transition is reflected in our ambitious energy compact, which includes the government's flagship project to electrify 5 million households and 25 million people using decentralized solar energy solutions. This is a major step towards closing our energy excess deficit by 2030.
And in furtherance of his
Joining me to discuss more on the COP26 is Dr. Paul Abolo. He is envirostrategist. He is the president and CEO, Eco Logistics Integrated Services. You're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Mr. Paul, climate change is evident by persistent flooding and warmer weather in recent time. Take us through the scale of this problem as it affects us in Nigeria, Africa, and possibly the global community.
Climate change has reached a level where you do not need to tell anybody that climate change has come.
Sure.
We see increased temperatures all over the world. We see flood like we've never seen it before. We hear of desertification at an alarming rate. We hear that Lake Chad has dried up to...
It keeps drying up.
To 10% of what it used to be. Then, outside Nigerian shores, you hear of wildfires You hear about fires burning in California, in Brazil. You hear of the ice cap melting. So climate change is really within us.
Even the flooding in New York.
Even the flooding in New York, then in Houston.
Wow.
So it's climate change is here. It's real. You really don't need to overemphasize it. That is where we are.
Now that the world has realized how delicate this situation is, and world global leaders, environmentalists like you have converged in Scotland, talking about Glasgow, what do you think the issues that are ongoing now and the possible way out?
Yes, this kind of meeting, which is called the COP, Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, started about 27 years ago.
Okay, that's quite a long time.
So every year they hold this meeting. So Conference of Parties 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the 26th. Actually, it's supposed to be the 27th, but they couldn't hold last year because of coronavirus. However, the urgency is here to do something. The parties, 197 countries coming together to discuss this issue, to find a solution on what to do, and to reduce global warming through reduced emission, because emission is actually the cause for global warming. Some people call it pollution. You know, it is denominated in carbon dioxide. So that's exactly what causes global warming, and global warming is the result of climate change.
Well, Africa, particularly Nigeria, is an oil-producing state. When we talk about fossil fuels, some of these emissions are traced to our communities. We need this to grow our economy, particularly at the time that the world is looking to recover. How are we going to balance this with this green revolution that is ongoing?
All right, let's get this right. Nigeria is a developing country, like other countries in Africa. And developing countries have contributed less than 4%. Forget whether we are a fossil fuel country, less than 4% of the cost of the global warming. So given, yes, we produce oil, but if you listen to our president's speech at COP26, he said that Nigeria is more of a gas-producing country than an oil-producing country. And then he went forward to say gas is cleaner. So he requested for support for us to develop our gas so that we can cut down emission and head towards net zero. Of course, net zero is one of the goals for COP26. So talking about Nigeria, let us not really look at Nigeria as the main people who cause it because we produce oil.
We know where it's coming from.
Sure,
we don't want to begin to call these names, but also they are part of the superpowers.
They know.
But so are you saying their influence? I don't know. How are the conversations going as regards to them cutting down on theirs for cleaner fuel?
Oh, no, the main business. The main business. If you listen to the ongoing speech at COP26, you will see that they have come to a sense of urgency. If you listen to Queen Elizabeth said the time for action is now.
It's now.
And Joe Biden said that we are not where we ought to be, but we are making efforts to get there. And Boris Johnson said 1 minute to midnight. Wow. So, you know, Angela Merkel said we are not yet there, but we are struggling to get there. So you'll see that in their statements, there's a huge sense of urgency. So what did we say in Nigeria? Our president captured it very well. He took a position and he said, we don't want to make the mistakes that other countries made. That was so unique. So the countries that went polluting the environment and the rest of it, what he said was that Nigeria will not make that mistake. And he said emphatically that we are transiting to a low-carbon economy. So that was beautiful. I really loved it when I heard him say that.
Okay, now that Africa is bearing the brunt of those people that are actually causing this pollution and are looking at the move to recover, and now we're talking about net zero, how feasible is this for us in Africa as well as the global community?
All right, yes, Africa is bearing the brunt because like African and developing countries, they have the less capacity to adapt to the impacts. So climate change has no boundary. However, it's when you have the capacity to deal with the impacts, so you feel it less. We don't have insurance here to take care of flood. Farmers are displaced. Post-harvest losses are recorded.
We saw that in Kebbi State with the flooding.
Yes, so we cannot adapt to it. So yes, maybe I'll agree with you. We bear the brunt. So what are we doing towards net zero? We need to understand what net zero is. Net zero means a condition where how much you pollute is balanced off by how much you absorb. So if you have you have the trees or whatsoever, and the trees are absorbing, so it brings you to net zero. And that's exactly how God created the world before man's greed took over. So for Africa, you don't like that. But for Africa, we are making efforts to balance between mitigation and adaptation. So mitigation is doing the things that and activities that will prevent carbon into the atmosphere, which, of course, you know, carbon is the cause for global warming.
Global warming, sure.
And adaptation are doing the things that will help you adapt to the impacts of climate change already. So we are looking at balancing between adaptation and mitigation.
Mitigation.
Yeah.
Okay, $100 billion is needed every year to deliver on net zero and adaptation. What would you like to see from developed and developing nations? It's a huge investment.
It's not a huge investment.
Okay.
Why? When you look at
the effects,
the impacts, if you don't make that investment. If you don't make that investment, the impact's going to triple the value of that investment.
We're already feeling it.
We're already feeling it. So, however, the Paris Agreement is so beautiful. Paris Agreement stressed it that developed nations need to scale up their contributions to $100 billion a year starting 2020, which will assist the developing nations to transit to low carbon economy. So back to the president's speech, the president emphasized on it, said, to make these changes, he said so, and I really love the way he put it. He said it twice. To make these changes, we need technology and funding support. Wow. He was emphatic about it.
That brings me to the last question before I let you go. How do we create an inclusive economy where renewable energy and this net initiative can be a catalyst?
Yes, we can. Again, referring back to the speech of the president, he said we are adopting a renewable energy solar, and he said bottom-up approach, where we intend to provide power to 5 million Nigerians, 25 million people, 5 million homes, 25 million people through renewable sources.
Which started from the rural areas.
So that's a very good sign of inclusion. However, we need to do a little bit more in the area of agriculture so that we can transit agricultural practices from the traditional agricultural practices to the climate-smart agricultural practices.
It's been a long time coming where you have so much sun in this part of the country. When you go to the southwest, southeast, you have the wind, which you can generate energy from. And when you go to hydro, we have wind, we have the sun. Where have we been lagging? And following this urgency now, how can we bring this to bear almost immediately?
It costs money to transit to the technology that will give you these things. So that's why, again, the president emphasized
Abolo, President and CEO, Eco Logistics Integrated Services. Technology is the way to go. Thank you for having me on Business Express.
It's my pleasure being here, and thank you for having me.
Stocks declined Wednesday following profit taken after stocks gained Tuesday. The all-share index slipped to 41,975.45 points, 292 million shares, valued at 2,059 billion naira in 4,899 deals. This wraps up Business Express. Business Express returns tomorrow.